Chapter 15 Knitting. There had been earlier drinking than usual in the wine shop of Monsieur Defarge. As early as 6 o'clock in the morning, sallow faces peeping through its barred windows had described other faces within, bending over measures of wine. Monsieur Defarge sold a very thin wine at the best of times, but it would seem to have been an unusually thin wine that he sold at this time. A sour wine, moreover, or a souring, for its influence on the mood of those who drank it was to make them gloomy. No vivacious bacchanalian flame leaped out of the pressed grape of Monsieur Defarge, but a smouldering fire that burnt in the dark lay hidden in the dregs of it. So we're back in France, guys. So we spent many of the last chapters in England, and then we're back to France also. Okay, so I think you're really beginning to see why it's called A Tale of Two Cities. Because we go back and forth, and then by the last book, because we're in book 2 now, everything's gonna collide already. Okay, so get excited for that. Know that all of these chapters that we're going through is set up for a climax that will be unlike any other. This had been the third morning in succession on which there had been early drinking at the wine shop of Monsieur Defarge. It had begun on Monday, and here was Wednesday come. There had been more of early brooding than drinking, for many men had listened and whispered and slunk about there from the time of the opening of the door, who could not have laid a piece of money on the counter to save their souls. These were to the full as interested in the place, however, as if they could have commanded whole barrels of wine, and they glided from seat to seat and from corner to corner, swallowing talk in lieu of drink with greedy looks. Notwithstanding an unusual flow of company, the master of the wine shop was not visible. He was not missed, for nobody who crossed the threshold looked for him. Nobody asked for him. Nobody wondered to see only Madame Defarge in her seat, presiding over the distribution of wine with a bowl of battered small coins before her, as much defaced and beaten out of their original impress as the small coinage of humanity from whose ragged pockets they had come. A suspended interest and a prevalent absence of mind were perhaps observed by the spies who looked in at the wine shop, as they looked in at every place, high and low, from the king's palace to the criminal's goal. Games at cards languished, players at dominoes mousingly built towers with them, drinkers drew figures on the tables with spilt drops of wine. Madame Defarge herself picked out the pattern on her sleeve with her toothpick, and saw and heard something inaudible and invisible a long way off. Thus Saint Antoine and this vinous feature of his, until midday, it was high noontide, when 2 dusty men passed through his streets and under his swinging lamps, of whom one was Monsieur Defarge, the other a mender of roads in a blue cap. All adust and athirst, the 2 entered the wine shop. Their arrival had lighted a kind of fire in the breast of Saint Antoine, fast spreading as they came along, which stirred and flickered in flames of faces at most doors and windows. Yet no one had followed them, and no man spoke when they entered the wine shop, though the eyes of every man there were turned upon them. Okay, so the last time we were in France, it was the chapter The Gorgon's Head, and if you remember, the Monsieur the Marquis was assassinated, and he was stabbed with a heart that said, drive him fast to his tomb, from Jacques, which we know Jacques is kind of like the code word, the code name for the stuff that's going on in the wine shop, which we know Monsieur Defarge is a part of. Okay, and we also remember the mender of roads. We met him also. He's the one who we met him briefly before the Monsieur the Marquis was killed in the chapter before the Gorgon's Head. "Good day, gentlemen," said Monsieur Defarge. It may have been a signal for loosening the general tongue. It elicited an answering chorus of "Good day." "It is bad weather, gentlemen," said Defarge, shaking his head, upon which every man looked at his neighbour, and then all cast down their eyes and sat silent except one man, who got up and went out. Okay, so everyone just kind of turned and looked at Defarge, and then he was like, "Good day," and then everyone started talking, and then he said, "It is bad weather," and when he said that, everyone became quiet, and one man exited the room. "My wife," said Defarge aloud, addressing Madame Defarge, "I have travelled certain leagues with this good mender of roads, called Jacques, I met him by accident a day and a half journey out of Paris. He's a good child, this mender of roads called Jacques. Give him to drink, my wife. Okay, so Defarge is like, I met this man, this mender of roads, and his name is Jacques also. A second man got up and went out. Madame Defarge set wine before the mender of roads called Jacques, who doffed his blue cap to the company and drank. In the breast of his blouse he carried some coarse dark bread. He ate of this between whiles, and sat munching and drinking near Madame Defarge's counter. A third man got up and went out. Defarge refreshed himself with a draught of wine, but he took less than was given to the stranger, as being himself a man to whom it was no rarity, and stood waiting until the countryman had made his breakfast. He looked at no one present, and no one now looked at him, not even Madame Defarge, who had taken up her knitting and was at work. Have you finished your repast, friend? He asked in due season. Yes, thank you. Come then, you shall see the apartment that I told you should occupy. It will suit you to a marvel. Out of the wine shop into the street, out of the street into a courtyard, out of the courtyard up a steep staircase, out of the staircase into a garret, formerly the garret where a white-haired man sat on a low bench, stooping forward and very busy making shoes. So Defarge leads the mender of roads to an apartment, and we've been in this apartment before. What is this apartment, guys? This is the room where Mr. Manette, Dr. Manette used to be in, remember? So all the way back in book 1, this was the apartment where Defarge was keeping Dr. Manette when he was still crazy and making shoes. No white-haired man was there now, but the 3 men were there who had gone out of the wine shop singly, and between them and the white-haired man afar off was the one small link that they had once looked in at him through the chinks in the wall. So these 3 men who exited the wine shop, they met up in this apartment that used to be the shoemaker's place, okay? And they were also the same 3 jocks who were peeking at him all those years ago when Lucy and Mr. Lorry went to get and save Dr. Manette. Defarge closed the door carefully and spoke in a subdued voice. Jock 1, Jock 2, Jock 3. This is the witness encountered by appointment by me, Jock 4. He will tell you all. Speak, Jock 5. The mender of roads, blue cap in hand, wiped his swarthy forehead with it and said, Where shall I commence, monsieur? Commence, was Monsieur Defarge's not unreasonable reply. At the commencement. I love it. It's so cool. He's like, where should I begin? And he's like, begin at the beginning. So cool. So, Mender of the Roads is clearly part of the dark things that are going on in the wine shop. He's giving them news. I saw him then, messieurs, began the mender of roads, a year ago this running summer, underneath the carriage of the Marquis, hanging by the chain. Behold the manner of it. I leaving my work on the road, the sun going to bed, the carriage of the Marquis slowly ascending the hill, he hanging by the chain like this. Again the mender of roads went through the old performance, in which he ought to have been perfect by that time, seeing that it had been the infallible resource and indispensable entertainment of his village during a whole year. So guys, if you remember, the mender of the roads was the one who saw someone hanging on to the bottom of the carriage of the Marquis. Okay, Monsieur the Marquis. Jock 1 struck in and asked if he had ever seen the man before. Never, answered the mender of roads, recovering his perpendicular. Jock 3 demanded how he afterwards recognized him then. By his tall figure, said the mender of roads, softly and with his finger at his nose. When Monsieur the Marquis demands that evening, say, what is he like? I make response. Tall as a spectre. You should have said short as a dwarf, returned Jock 2. What did I know? The deed was not then accomplished. Neither did he confide in me. Observe, under those circumstances even, I do not offer my testimony. Monsieur the Marquis indicates me with his finger, standing near our little fountain, and says, To me, bring that rascal. My faith, messieurs, I offer nothing. He is right there, Jock, murmured Defarge to him who had interrupted. Go on. Good, said the mender of roads with an air of mystery. The tall man is lost, and he is sought. How many months? 9, 10, 11? No matter the number, said Defarge. He is well hidden, but at last he is unluckily found. Go on. So, This tall man who was hiding in the bottom of the Monsieur the Marquis carriage, he is obviously the one who assassinated the Monsieur the Marquis, the Monsignor, okay? I am again at work upon the hillside, and the sun is again about to go to bed. I am collecting my tools to descend to my cottage down in the village below, where it is already dark, when I raise my eyes and see coming over the hill 6 soldiers. In the midst of them is a tall man with his arms bound, tied to his side like this. With the aid of his indispensable cap, he represented a man with his elbows bound fast at his hips, with cords that were knotted behind him. I stand aside, messieurs, by my heap of stones, to see the soldiers and their prisoner pass, for it is a solitary road that, where any spectacle is well worth looking at. And at first, as they approach, I see no more than that they are 6 soldiers, with a tall man bound, and that they are almost black to my sight, except on the side of the sun going to bed, where they have a red edge, messieurs. Also I see that their long shadows are on the hollow ridge on the opposite side of the road, and are on the hill above it, and are like the shadows of giants. Also I see that they are covered with dust, and that the dust moves with them as they come, tramp, tramp. But when they advance quite near to me, I recognize the tall man, and he recognizes me. Ah, but he would be well content to precipitate himself over the hillside once again, as on the evening when he and I first encountered, close to the same spot. Okay, so the man hiding under the carriage of Monsignor, the one who killed him, was arrested. He was found, okay? And oh man, Dickens is such a good writer, guys. He paints a picture so well. Nga. The sun was setting, so everything was orange and red, and he saw the soldiers bringing the arrested man, and their shadows kuno cast because of the sun were so black and so long. It was like they were giants. They had the shadows of giants, and then they were so dusty. As they moved, dust was kind of circling around them. And oh my gosh, again, Dickens good is meant to be. I feel like Dickens was meant to be a filmmaker. He's a storyteller, and he's such a visual storyteller. Good. He really gives it to us in a cinematic way. So please imagine this. Don't just see the words in your books. Imagine, see the paintings, see the movie that Dickens is showing to us using words. He described it as if he were there, and it was evident that he saw it vividly. Perhaps he had not seen much in his life. I do not show the soldiers that I recognize the tall man. He does not show the soldiers that he recognizes me. We do it, and we know it with our eyes. Come on, says the chief of the company, pointing to the village. Bring him fast to his tomb. And they bring him faster. I follow. His arms are swelled because of being bound so tight. His wooden shoes are large and clumsy, and he is lame. Because he is lame and consequently slow, they drive him with their guns like this. He imitated the action of a man's being impelled forward by the butt ends of muskets. As they descend the hill like madmen running a race, he falls. They laugh and pick him up again. His face is bleeding and covered with dust, but he cannot touch it. Thereoupon they laugh again. They bring him into the village. All the village runs to look. They take him past the mill and up to the prison. All the village sees the prison gate open in the darkness of the night and swallow him. Like this. He opened his mouth as wide as he could and shut it with a sounding snap of his teeth. Observant of his unwillingness to mar the effect by opening it again, Defarge said, "Go on, Jacques." Okay, so the vendor of the road said, yeah, they took him into prison and it swallowed him up like this, and he kind of like opened his mouth and shut it to like kind of show how they put him into the prison. He didn't not talk anymore after, because he was afraid it would ruin the effect of his like analogy. And then Defarge was like quiet, and I was like, okay, continue talking. All right, so again, Dickens good adds. It's a very intense scene, but Dickens adds his humor to it. All the village pursued the mender of roads on tiptoe and in a low voice, withdraws. All the village whispers by the fountain. All the village sleeps. All the village dreams of that unhappy one. Within the locks and bars of the prison on the crag, and never to come out of it except to perish. In the morning, with my tools upon my shoulder, eating my morsel of black bread as I go, I make a circuit by the prison on my way to my work. There I see him, high up, behind the bars of a lofty iron cage, bloody and dusty as last night, looking through. He has no hand free to wave to me. I dare not call to him. He regards me like a dead man. So they took the assassin, they put him in a cage, hung him up in the public square where everyone could see him. Defarge and the three glanced darkly at one another. The looks of all of them were dark, repressed, and revengeful. As they listened to the countryman's story, the manner of all of them, while it was secret, was authoritative too. They had the air of a rough tribunal. Jock 1 and 2 sitting on the old pallet bed, each with his chin resting on his hand, and his eyes intent on the road mender. Jock 3 equally intent on one knee behind them, with his agitated hand always gliding over the network of fine nerves about his mouth and nose. Defarge standing between them and the narrator whom he had stationed in the light of the window, by turns looking from him to them, and from them to him. "Go on, Jock," said Defarge. Okay? Oh my gosh, I love this scene. The three Jocks and Defarge are all listening to the story, and they're kind of in the shadows of the room. And then the mender of the roads is directly in the spotlight of the window. Good. The light coming in through the window is spotlighting him as he's telling the story about the assassin. And they're just listening, and then Jock 3, good guys, is always touching the sides of his mouth. This guy, si Jock 3, is always good ko nang rubbing ko no his nose and his mouth. He's constantly like, I don't know, it's Jock 3 is gonna show up more and more in the story, and he's always doing this. He's always touching his mouth. Good. "Go on, Jock," said Defarge. "He remains up there in his iron cage some days. The village looks at him by stealth, for it is afraid, but it always looks up from a distance at the prison on the crag. And in the evening, when the work of day is achieved and it assembles to gossip at the fountain, all faces are turned towards the prison. Formerly they were turned towards the posting house, now they are turned towards the prison. They whisper at the fountain that although condemned to death, he will not be executed. They say that petitions have been presented in Paris, showing that he was enraged and made mad by the death of his child. They say that a petition has been presented to the king himself. What do I know? It is possible, perhaps yes, perhaps no." Okay, so, oh my gosh. So, it reveals to us who the assassin is, guys. Who is the assassin? They say kuno nga, people are defending him because his child died that same day, and that's why he went mad and killed and assassinated the Monsieur the Marquis. Okay, so who is that? Do you remember? It's Gaspard. Gaspard is the father who the Monsieur the Marquis was able to run over with his carriage. So that same day, after his son died, he snuck into the bottom of the carriage of Monsieur the Marquis, rode it home to the home of Monsieur the Marquis. That same night, Monsieur the Marquis met with Darnay, okay, and then he assassinated the Monsieur the Marquis that night, and now he's arrested and bleeding and dusty where everyone can see him, okay? And listen then, Jock, number 1 of that name sternly interposed. Know that a petition was presented to the king and queen. All here, yourself excepted, saw the king take it in his carriage in the street, sitting beside the queen. It is Defarge, whom you see here, who at the hazard of his life darted out before the horses with a petition in his hand. And once again, listen, Jock, said the kneeling number 3, his fingers ever wandering over and over those fine nerves with a strikingly greedy air, as if he hungered for something that was neither food nor drink. The guard, horse and foot, surrounded by the petitioner, and struck him blows. You hear? I hear, messieurs. Go on then, said Defarge. Again, on the other hand, they whisper at the fountain, resumed the countryman, that he is brought down into our country to be executed on the spot, and that he will be very certainly to be executed. They even whisper that because he was slain, Monseigneur, and because Monseigneur was the father of his tenants, serfs what you will, he will be executed as a parricide. One old man says at the fountain that his right hand, armed with a knife, will be burnt off before his face, that into wounds which will be made in his arms, his breast, and his legs, there will be poured boiling oil, melted lead, hot resin, wax, and sulfur. Finally, that he will be torn limb from limb by 4 strong horses. That old man says all this was actually done to a prisoner who made an attempt to the life of the last king, Louis XV. But how do I know if he lies? I am not a scholar. Okay, so the Jocks were the ones who petitioned for the life of Gaspard to kind of save Gaspard from execution, okay? But the king and queen said, no, he has to be executed. And he's gonna be executed in the worst way possible, guys. They're gonna cut off his hands, stab him, and pour like wax and oil and hot resin into his wounds. It's like the worst. That's like the worst punishment. That's the worst kind, the most painful execution. Listen, once again then, Jacques, said the man with the restless hand and the craving air. The name of that prisoner was Damiens, and it was all done in open day, in the open streets of the city of Paris, and nothing was more noticed in the vast concourse that saw it done than the crowd of ladies of quality and fashion, who were full of eager attention to the last Jacques, prolonged until nightfall, when he had lost 2 legs and an arm, and still breathed, and it was done. Why, how old are you? 35, said the mender of roads, who looked 60. It was done when you were more than 10 years old. You might have seen it. Enough, said Defarge with grim impatience. Long live the devil. Go on. Well, some whisper this, some whisper that. They speak of nothing else. Even the fountain appears to fall to that tune. At length, on Sunday night, when all the village is asleep, come soldiers, winding down from prison, and their guns ring on the stones of the little street. Workmen dig, workmen hammer, soldiers laugh and sing. In the morning, by the fountain, there is raised a gallows, 40 feet high, poisoning the water. The mender of roads looked through rather than at the low ceiling, and pointed as if he saw the gallows somewhere in the sky. All work is stopped, all assemble there. Nobody leads the cows out. The cows are there with the rest. At midday, the roll of drums. Soldiers have marched into the prison in the night, and he is in the midst of many soldiers. He is bound as before, and in his mouth there is a gag, tied so with a tight string, making him look almost as if he laughed. He suggested it by creasing his face with his 2 thumbs from the corners of his mouth to his ears. On the top of the gallows is fixed the knife, blade upwards, with its point in the air. He is hanged there, 40 feet high, and is left hanging, poisoning the water. Okay, so they built a gallows and they hung him, guys. They hung Gaspard, and they hung him over the fountain of the town. So his corpse is rotting and kind of falling apart and falling into the water of the town's people. Okay? And then his gag, pag yun ko no, the thing they tied around his neck, kind of makes it looks like he's smiling. And this is perfect, guys, because actually, Chircara and I, our choice good for Gaspard as an actor is Heath Ledger. Now, I know Heath Ledger's dead, but it's our movie. We can do whatever we want. And so Heath Ledger is our Gaspard good. And this smile thing is just a coincidence because we just decided it this year nga Heath Ledger's the perfect Gaspard. And I only notice now this detail about this gag around his mouth, making him look like he's smiling. So guys, I've reread this book probably like 6 times already, but I'm still noticing new things about it. It's so cool. I love this book. I wasn't looking forward to. I was kind of like putting off doing like reading, continuing to read because I'm tired, but I'm so into it now that I'm starting. So, and we're going through it. Like I'm so into it again. It is frightful, messieurs. How can the women and the children draw water? Who can gossip of an evening under that shadow? Under it, have I said, when I left the village Monday evening as the sun was going to bed and looked back from the hill. The shadow struck across the church, across the mill, across the prison, seemed to strike across the earth, messieurs, to where the sky rests upon it. The hungry man gnawed one of his fingers as he looked at the other three, and his finger quivered with a craving that was on him. So Jack 3, guys, he's the one who keeps touching his mouth. He's actually chewing on his fingers already. He's like chewing it. He's like eating his fingers. Because he's craving something. What do you think is he craving? What do you think? That's all, messieurs. I left at sunset, as I had been warned to do, and as I walked on that night and half next day, until I met, as I was warned I should, this comrade. With him I came on, now riding and now walking, through the rest of yesterday, and through last night, and here you see me. After a gloomy silence, the first Jock said, "Good, you have acted and recounted faithfully. Will you wait for us a little outside the door?" "Very willingly," said the mender of roads, whom Defarge escorted to the top of the stairs, and leaving seated there, returned. The three had risen, and their heads were together when he came back to the garret. "How say you, Jack?" demanded number one. "To be registered?" "To be registered as doomed to destruction," returned Defarge. "Magnificent," croaked the man with a craving. "The chateau and all the race?" inquired the first. "The chateau and all the race," returned Defarge. "Extermination." Oh my gosh, okay. So, after hearing this from the mender of roads, they then said, the jocks were like, "Okay, Defarge, should we record? Should we register them?" And then Defarge was like, "Yes, we should register them." And then they were like, the chateau is house. The house and all the race, okay? So they're talking about Monsieur the Marquis. And they're saying that, okay, because of this, he killed a child, and the father of that child killed him, but then the father of this child, this assassin, is killed, is executed in a public and shameful way, good. Then they said, okay, we have to register, we have to record the family of Monsieur the Marquis and his entire family, okay? And who is the family, guys, of Monsieur the Marquis? Think about that, okay? Who man? Darnay, right? Darnay is related to Monsieur the Marquis, right? He's the nephew of Monsieur the Marquis. Monsieur the Marquis was the twin of Darnay's father. All right, so it's perfect timing that Darnay kind of gave up on his family. He's not living in France anymore. He's living in England, and he kind of gave up his family name. The man repeated in a rapturous croak, magnificent, and began gnawing another finger. "Are you sure," asked Jock 2 of Defarge, "that no embarrassment can arise from our manner of keeping the register? Without doubt it is safe, for no one beyond ourselves can decipher it. But shall we always be able to decipher it? Or I ought to say, will she?" So the register, guys, it's a list of names. Okay, it's a list of names that need to be punished. It's a list of names that need to be like done justice upon. It's a list of it's a hate list. It's a hit list. It's a list of hate and death and bloodiness, good. And they can't make a literal list. They can't really write these names down. So the list it's coded. It's something that is in code, okay? And the one who knows how to read the code, they said, will she always be able to decipher it? Will she always be able to read this list or write this list? Who do you think they're talking about? Who female do you think would be in charge of coding and decoding this list of enemies of the jocks? Who do you think? Jock, returned Defarge, drawing himself up. "If Madame, my wife, undertook to keep the register in her memory alone, she would not lose a word of it, not a syllable of it. Knitted in her own stitches and her own symbols, it will always be as plain to her as the sun. Confide in Madame Defarge. It would be easier for the weakest poltroon that lives to erase himself from existence than to erase one letter of his name or crimes from the knitted register of Madame Defarge. So, the reason why Madame Defarge is always knitting, and ever since, guys, we first met them, she's always knitting. She's the eye, that's the list. Okay, her knitting is like this code of names that they are going to take revenge on, okay? And now the family of Monsieur the Marquis, the family of Darnay, will be added to that list, to that knitting. That's why the title is Knitting, okay? It's so cool. There was a murmur of confidence and approval, and when the man who hungered asked, "Is this rustic to be sent back soon?" "I hope so. He is very simple. Is he not a little dangerous?" "He knows nothing," said Defarge, "at least nothing more than would easily elevate himself to a gallows of the same height. I charge myself with him. Let him remain with me. I will take care of him and set him on his road. He wishes to see the fine world, the king, the queen, and court. Let him see them on Sunday." "What?" exclaimed the hungry man, staring. "Is it a good sign that he wishes to see royalty and nobility?" "Jock," said Defarge, "judiciously show a cat milk, if you wish her to thirst for it. Judiciously show a dog his natural prey, if you wish him to bring it down one day." So Defarge said nga, "I'm gonna take the mender of the roads to the palace on Sunday, because he wants to see the royalty, he wants to see the nobility." And this was common before, guys. There used to be tours by of like Versailles and of the palaces, and murag the other jocks were like, "What, murag? Is it good nga we're gonna show him all of this?" And then Defarge said, "Of course, if you want a cat to thirst for milk, you show them the milk. If you want a dog to know its enemy, you show him its enemy." So they're training future people to help them in their quest for revenge and rebellion. Nothing more was said, and the mender of roads, being found already dozing on the topmost stair, was advised to lay himself down on the pallet bed and take some rest. He needed no persuasion and was soon asleep. Worse quarters than Defarge's wine shop could easily have been found in Paris for a provincial slave of that degree. Saving for a mysterious dread of Madame by which he was constantly haunted, his life was very new and agreeable. But Madame sat all day at her counter, so expressly unconscious of him, and so particularly determined not to perceive that his being there had any connection with anything below the surface, that he shook in his wooden shoes whenever his eyes lighted on her. For he contended with himself that it was impossible to foresee what that lady might pretend next, and he felt assured that if she should take it into her brightly ornamented head to pretend that she had seen him do a murder and afterwards flay the victim, she would infallibly go through with it until the play was played out. So basically, the mender of the roads is scared of Madame Defarge because she's so intense. Remember, this is Jessica Chastain good. She's perfect for this. Jessica Chastain, and then Tom Hardy good is Defarge. Jessica Chastain is Madame Defarge. Therefore, when Sunday came, the mender of roads was not enchanted, though he said he was, to find that Madame was to accompany Monsieur and himself to Versailles. It was additionally disconcerting to have Madame knitting all the way there in a public conveyance. It was additionally disconcerting yet to have Madame in the crowd in the afternoon. Still with her knitting in her hands, the crowd waited to see the carriage of the king and queen. So they went to Versailles with Defarge, Madame Defarge, and this mender of roads. He's like their kid that they're bringing along on a field trip. And the whole time, Madame Defarge is knitting. "You work hard, Madame," said a man near her. "Yes," answered Madame Defarge. "I have a good deal to do." "What do you make, Madame?" "Many things." For instance," returned Madame Defarge composedly, "shrouds." Okay? So someone noticed her knitting and was like, "You're so busy, Madame. What are you knitting? What are you doing?" And she was like, "I'm knitting shrouds." Shrouds, guys, they're like sacks that you put dead bodies in. The man moved a little further away as soon as he could, and the mender of roads fanned himself with his blue cap, feeling it mighty close and oppressive. If he needed a king and queen to restore him, he was fortunate in having his remedy at hand, for soon the large-faced king and the fair-faced queen came in their golden coach, attending by the shining bull's eye of their court, a glittering multitude of laughing ladies and fine lords, and in jewels and silks and powder and splendor and elegant elegantly spurning figures and handsomely disdainful faces of both sexes, the mender of roads bathed himself so much to his temporary intoxication that he cried, "Long live the king! Long live the queen! Long live everybody and everything!" So when the king and queen passed with their entourage, and they're so fancy and they're so glamorous and they're so royal, the mender of roads was so overwhelmed with it. Then he began shouting like, "Long live the king! Long live the queen!" Murag, he was just going along kay murag na stirred up siya emotionally by seeing how gorgeous and rich they were. As if he had never heard of ubiquitous Jock in his time. Then there were gardens, courtyards, terraces, fountains, green banks, more king and queen, more bullseye, more lords and ladies, more long live they all, until he absolutely wept with sentiment. During the whole of his scene, which lasted some 3 hours, he had plenty of shouting and weeping in sentimental company, and throughout Defarge held him by the collar, as if to restrain him from flying at the objects of his brief devotion and tearing them to pieces. "Bravo," said Defarge, clapping him on the back when it was over, like a patron. "You are a good boy." The mender of roads was now coming to himself and was mistrustful of having made a mistake in his late demonstrations, but no. "You are the fellow we want," said Defarge in his ear. "You make these fools believe that it will last forever. Then they are the more insolent, and it is the nearer ended." "Hey," cried the mender of roads reflectively, "that's true. These fools know nothing, while they despise your breath and would stop it forever and ever, in you or in 100 like you rather than in one of their own horses or dogs. They only know what your breath tells them. Let it deceive them, then. A little longer, it cannot deceive them too much." Madame Defarge looked suspiciously at the client and nodded in confirmation. "As to you," said she, "you would shout and shed tears for anything, if it made a show and a noise. Say, would you not?" "Truly, madam, I think so, for the moment. If you were shown a great heap of dolls, and were set upon them to pluck them to pieces, and despoil them for your own advantage, you would pick out the richest and gayest, say, would you not?" "Truly, yes, madam." "Yes, and if you were shown a flock of birds unable to fly, and were set upon them to strip them of their feathers for your own advantage, you would set upon the birds of the finest feathers, would you not?" "It is true, madam." "You have seen both dolls and birds today," said Madame Defarge, with a wave of her hand toward the place where they had last been apparent. "Now go home." Oh, it's so cool. So the mender of the roads was screaming diba because he was so inspired by the riches. He was like, "Long live the king, long live the queen." And then murag nauwaw siya nga, he was saying it in front of Defarge and Madame Defarge. And then Defarge was like, No, it's okay. It's good that you're doing that because you're making them think that this is going to last forever. And the more they think that it's going to last forever, the faster it will end. And then Madame Defarge was like, "It's okay, don't be ashamed, because what you've proven today is that you will get loud and excited about anything that is loud and exciting. You will shout and shed tears for anything if it made a show and a noise." And she said, if I show you so many dolls or so many birds and I tell you to tear them apart, would you do it? And he was like, "Yes, I would." And she was like, "You have seen both dolls and birds today. Now go home." Okay, so, the Defarges good are so... They're so intense. They're so scary. They're so cool. That's chapter 15, knitting. Okay? So Chikara's gonna do chapter 16, still knitting. Alright? And then after that's still gonna be in France, guys. And then we're gonna in chapter 17, which we're gonna do Sud, we're gonna jump back to England again. Also, you're gonna have there's gonna be a question in Google Classroom for this. After this reading session, I'm gonna ask a question on which storyline you are enjoying more. Are you enjoying the England storyline with Carton, Lucy, Darnay, the love thing, or are you enjoying the French storyline with like the Jocks and the Defarges? So you have to tell me which one you're enjoying more, okay? But after now, you listen to all the other chapters. Alright, so I'll give you to Chigara chapter 16.